Welcome, everybody, to Inside Boxing Weekly on the Grueling Truth Sports Network. Inside Boxing Weekly is brought to you by ReplenishingCareInc.com, also GridironMo.com, and PowerPlusMouthGuards.com. That's a lot of .coms. I'm your host, Mike Goodpaster, and I want to welcome in my normal co-host, my abnormal co-host, Jeremiah Preisser.
Yeah, I'll be that. I'm happy to be on. Always happy to be on and talk some boxing with you guys. Let's get it going.
All right, and of course, then we have the normal co-host, John Einreinhofer. How you doing, John?
Mike, overjoyed to be here. We've got a lot to talk about, so anxious to get in the ring and get started.
All right, we're going to start off with Shafikov and Easter, Friday night. I'll tell you, people don't want to complain about Pacquiao-Horn obviously didn't watch this fight. Eugene Grant scored the fight 120-108 for Robert Easter. Jaime Garuya, or whatever the hell his name is, scored it 120-108 for Easter. I mean, I don't see how that's possible. I actually had Shafikov winning. What do you think, Jeremiah?
Yeah, I actually agree with you. I ended up watching it on the Russian feed, because a lot of times we can kind of, even though we try to separate ourselves from the biasness of commentators, a lot of times we still have a tendency to flow with it because, they have a tendency to pay attention to particular punches. But I watched it on the Russian feed, and I thought Shafikov won. I had him 7-5. In my opinion, it was pretty close in the beginning, though I think there were a good number of swing rounds that you could have scored in Shafikov's favor. Easter, to me, what I didn't like about what I saw there was he was fighting more like Adrian Broner, and it was a bit concerning for me because Easter in some of the other fights that I've seen, he could use his feet pretty well, but in this fight he seemed like he was just picking his shots and trying to pot shot Shafikov to a decision win. To me, it didn't look natural for him. I mean, he wasn't really getting a lot of leverage behind the shots. Shafikov seemed to take him just fine. I didn't seem to be bothered by him, but I've got to admit that I don't want to say that I'm a Shafikov fanboy, but I really, really like the guy. I mean, he's a short guy. He constantly fights the best. He's tough. He does a lot of old school things that you don't see from a lot of modern boxers now. He jabs as a little guy. He knows how to cut off the ring. He works hard. He always shows up in tremendous shape. He always fights the best. And that's kind of what I saw in this fight, was that Shafikov was the better in-fighter. He kept cutting off the ring. Easter seemed to oblige too often to fight on the inside. He relied a lot on that uppercut. But, again, I saw Shafikov outworking him. Easter seemed like he was fading about the fifth round on. And, again, he was just kind of pushing a lot of his punches. And Shafikov looked pretty sprightly even in the 10th, 11th, and 12th rounds. But the judges who scored at 120-108, honestly, those guys should be suspended. I mean, that fight was a robbery, not in the sense that I don't think you could have scored it for Easter, but in the sense that it's just corruption. I mean, they already made up their minds before the fight was played out. They had already made it up. It's just corruption, and it's just concerning.
Yeah, I think anybody that thought Easter won was blind. John, who do you think won?
I thought Easter won a tough, close fight. I
think the fight could have gone either way. It's just the 120-108. I mean, come on.
Right, but I think without getting into our next topic down the road, Pacquiao-Horn, I think it's worth addressing now. I never used to look at it this way until very, very recently, but let me throw out a theory on the Easter. And there's always been corruption in boxing, so I'm not a fool. I know we can have that. I know some of these judges can get influenced by certain promoters. They get perks. I think in the modern era, from what I've read from credible investigations, is that's more the way it goes is that certain promoters give them perks, and then they judge the fights of those promoters, not paid off, but they get perks. But getting to my point is that let's look, though, how all of us, probably even the three of us, if we're honest with ourselves, how we look at fights where there's a lot of very close rounds. What do we do, really? We criticize these judges that have lopsided scorecards in a close fight, and I've done the same, but what do? We start saying in a close fight, well, I'll give one round to Shafikov here because I gave the last round to Easter, but is that any better judging? In other words, playing devil's advocate for a moment, if a judge is to look at a round and it's very, very close, but he keeps giving a round to, say, Easter in this fight or Horn in the next fight, Does that mean the judge is crazy if every round that's very, very close they give to the same individual? Maybe not, if they just prefer a little bit more what one of these boxers is doing. What I thought,
but when you watch that fight, that's not a 12-0 fight, John.
But maybe what we need, believe it or not, and people always hated this, but I think might be the answer to this in the 10-point must system, is maybe what we need is to get back to more even rounds, even though people don't want to hear that. Maybe what we need, I've been thinking in recent years, when this keeps coming up, is maybe what we need in fights like Pacquiao-Horn and Easter-Shafikov is, if we really are just almost guessing as to who won the round when it's that close, maybe we should have even rounds. I think it got to a point where judges who had a lot of even rounds were getting ridiculed by the media years back, so even rounds disappeared, and there was a lot of boxing writers that were advocating against even rounds, and you see what you've seen in recent years, and I think maybe there's a good argument that maybe we need more even rounds, and then maybe just in the decisive round, somebody wins 10-9, and, of course, the very decisive rounds 10-8, and maybe we'd get better scorecards that way.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, but the problem with the even rounds was you did have guys, I think it was Guy Jutras in the Hagler-Duran fight, didn't he score like 8 rounds even?
Duran-Leonard won. I think he had even more than that. Even Mike, you're right.
Because the fight was scored 147 to 145.
Yeah. The favorite slide was, I think Michael Cass said he was the judge that had World War II a draw.
Yeah, and that's the problem you got. And let's face it, this is the thing. We'll get into some more with Pacquiao-Horn, but you got all these people.
I think even Jutras got it right, though. He got the decision right. So.
Yeah, but all these people that complain and say this will kill boxing. I mean, if you're a baseball fan, 1985 World Series Game 6, Don Denkinger blows a call up first. The Royals end up winning a game and winning the World Series. Super Bowl 40, where the Seahawks basically got shafted the entire game. This is not the only sport where human error by officials costs a team a game or a person a game. So I think that's kind of asinine to think. But my biggest question of Shafikov and Easter was this. What the hell is wrong with Adrian Broner? I mean, if you watch the fight, he's jumping up with these boys, acting like an idiot. I'm telling you what, if I'm sitting behind him, I'm going to tell him to sit his ass down.
Broner, Broner sells, so that's the thing. You look at his ratings, it shocks me, but I stopped talking negatively about him. Not that it means you should do whatever you want, but the guy's TV ratings are huge. So
well, he should have just put a little sign around his neck that said, "Look at me," because that's what he was doing.
I know. The guy
he was sitting there shadow boxing as if, Easter's going to look left or look behind him and start paying attention to the dumb combos.
Yeah, on the Russian broadcast, they kept showing him in between rounds and everything, so he got what he wanted.
Well,
I still think Mike Garcia is going to shut his ass up anyways.
For what he has actually accomplished, his numbers in this era of boxing are so high over the last couple of years. It shocked me, and that's when I stopped saying as much about him, because I thought, the guy, I mean, I wouldn't have even thought it worked, but the guy's ratings, in this era, his ratings are very, very high.
Yeah, but all fighters like him have high ratings because you either love his ass or you want to see him get knocked out, but either way, you're watching him.
I agree.
He's still an idiot.
I think that's what it is.
Yeah, he's still an idiot, but most of those guys that act like that are. I mean, Floyd Mayweather's an idiot. I mean, Floyd Mayweather's going to be allowed to make hundreds of millions of dollars again. I mean, hell, how many domestic abuse cases he had against him?
But Floyd Mayweather does beat good guys, not talking about not validating what he's done outside of the ring with instances like that.
Yeah, I know. He's beat some studs. I mean, hell, he beat Andre Berto his last fight 2 years ago. He beat an old Manny Pacquiao, which we're going to go into now. Manny Pacquiao, Jeff Horn. I know you both had it scored for Pacquiao. I had it scored for Horn. I think there's no robbery here. It's a controversial decision. I could have seen the fight going either way. I actually thought that Horn was definitely going to lose the fight when I heard the 117 to 111. I don't know how anybody could have got 117 and 111 for either side in that fight. But my point on this fight is and we talked about how people look for different things when they score a fight. I like effective aggression. And I don't think effective aggression is just landing a bunch of punches when you're aggressive. I think Horn did this. Horn made Pacquiao really uncomfortable. He made him fight backing up, which he doesn't like to do. And Pacquiao never could get out of that. I mean, he roughed Pacquiao up. The headbutts were both of them's fault. They're both leaning in. So the dirty fighter crap, yeah, I mean, Horn is a dirty fighter, but he's a dirty fighter because he's so aggressive. And I think that Horn gets a lot of disrespect from this, and I think it's an absolute joke. I think it was caused by ESPN, and I would challenge you both to watch the fight with no sound. John, you want to give your take on the fight?
Well, yeah, one thing I will agree with you there, Mike, and I've been saying this for many, many years. I think that for boxing to be the best sport it can be, and since it's part of the principles of judging, judges need to look at effective aggressiveness more. I mean, a fighter who tries to make the fight and is effective definitely deserves to be rewarded. So I always, when I'm judging a fight, that is one of the top elements for me, for sure. And I thought, Horn definitely did do some of that. I don't think it was really a robbery because I had the fight close, but I did not give Pacquiao a 10-8 round in the ninth, which in hindsight I would lean towards anybody that did more than didn't. But this is, again, a fight like we were talking about with the Easter and Shafikov. I thought a lot of rounds that were very close that I actually gave to Pacquiao, I could have given to Horn. I remember thinking that at the time, and I confess to doing just what I said a lot of us do and the judges do, that's not necessarily a great way to judge a fight, is, okay, this round's very, very close. I don't know which way to go. I gave Pacquiao the last one. I guess I'll give Horn this one. Nobody admits it, but that's what most people do, and that's probably not the best way to do it. So this was a fight that had a lot of rounds, like I was just talking about, that maybe we actually need to go back to more even rounds. If you did that, there would have been a lot of even rounds in this fight, and then I think you could have maybe seen Horn edging it out, even with Pacquiao having that big ninth round. I did think Pacquiao won the fight, but I had a lot of rounds that could have gone either way.
Now, my question is, on the 10-8 round, were you close to giving Horn a 10-8 when he almost knocked Pacquiao out towards the end of the sixth round?
I did not think it was that kind of a round, and I will do that sometimes.
Oh, I think he had him hurt every bit as bad as Horn was hurt in the ninth.
Well, Mike,
I mean, Pacquiao staggered. It was just at the end of the round. And my question is this, a 10-8 round to me, you got to dominate the whole round. I mean, Pacquiao landed a big punch. But, I mean, the first half of the ninth round I don't think was a one-sided beatdown. It wasn't like for 3 minutes he got beat around the ring. And I'm usually, unless it's really bad, I'm not going to score it 10-8 unless you knock the guy down.
I think, when you have the referee at the end, and I don't think this means that Pacquiao won the fight like some people are saying, and I think that's where they're wrong. But when you have referee Mark Nelson coming in at the end of the ninth, which we all saw on ESPN, saying, I'm not saying I'm thinking about stopping the fight, saying I'm going to stop the fight, it's over, and then getting talked out of it.
Yeah, but that just tells you how incompetent Mark Nelson is.
I don't think so. I think Nelson's a decent referee.
Nelson's incompetent. Any man that would interject himself into an event like that, in a fight like that, the first time somebody has been hurt, is looking for a reason to stop the fight. I mean, you don't have to tell him that. You let the man come out, and if he's staggered around the third or 10th round, he gets caught, stop the fight. But you don't have to interject yourself, because this is the problem I have with that, all right? And I know all these people think Bob Arum fixed this fight. Why would Bob Arum do that when you could have had a fight against Terrence Crawford that pays you $30 million? My point is this. When he goes and he interjects himself, instead of Alan Rushton, his trainer, having a chance to work with him for a minute, he then gets to just work with him for 20 seconds. So you give Pacquiao another advantage because they're over there begging to be able to keep fighting. So I don't think that's good refereeing. I mean, if you're going to stop the fight, stop the fight. If you think he's that bad hurt, stop the fight. If not, shut the hell up and get out of the way and let his corner work on him. I mean, he also had a big-ass cut, and you got this guy coming along, I'm going to stop the fight because he got hurt one time. It was the only time in the fight he was hurt. Yeah, he was hurt pretty bad, it looked like. But, I mean, get the hell out of the way. You could have always come over, right at the end there, right at the end of that 1 minute and looked at him and checked him out, which is what I would think you would want to do anyways. Because why would you want to give him that minute to recover before you go check on him to see what kind of shape he's in?
I think Horn was in really, really bad shape. I'm glad Nelson didn't stop the fight. But, Horn was in bad shape. He took more than one big shot. He was taking a lot of shots at the close of that round, and he turned out not to be done, to his credit. He looked done, but that's what boxing's about. That's what.
Yeah, because from the 10th to the 12th round, Pacquiao's the guy that looked tired.
Right, and that's what inspires us about boxing, and that's what makes boxing great, is that Horn, listening to good corner work, sucked it up after the 9th round and came out and gave it everything he had in the last 2 rounds, and Pacquiao looked like a guy that punched himself out and that he didn't have much left, and it gave Horn a chance to pull out the fight. So that's what makes boxing great, and it worked out with a lot of drama, but I think Horn was legitimately in very bad shape at the close of the night.
Hey, I just remembered Jeremiah's with us too. Jeremiah, you want to give an opinion on the fight? Sorry about that.
Yeah. I'm just listening. I'm just hanging out. Letting you guys have your say. Well, the thing about the round in particular, which Horn was hurt, I don't think he was that hurt at the very end of the round, because if I'm not mistaken, Pacquiao landed those big shots more towards the middle of the round, and Horn was doing this subtle job of making Pacquiao miss a lot of haymakers. I mean, I hadn't seen Pacquiao try to finish a guy with haymakers like that in a while, but again, I don't think he should have went in there and asked to stop the fight. Again, you are taking a little drama away from the fight, but in terms of the overall picture, I did have Pacquiao winning. I had him winning closely. I thought Pacquiao wanted the cleaner, harder punches, but it was one of those things where Horn was making him uncomfortable, and it was one of the few things that you've seen. You haven't seen in a while, a guy backing Pacquiao up and posing his physical size. And I heard a lot of people after the fight asking how big Horn was. And obviously he was bigger. You would expect that he would be significantly bigger from a guy who started, at 100.
Yeah, but everybody's bigger than Pacquiao at Pacquiao fights.
Exactly. That's why I didn't see it as that big of a deal. Plus, if Pacquiao's choosing to fight at that weight division, well, then that's sort of on him. But my problem is that 117, 113 scorecard. I mean, I suppose I can see it's
117, 111.
111, sorry. I suppose I can see it scored for Horn, but the problem is that scorecard in particular. I just didn't see it as that wide of a fight. I don't see how you could get that wide of a measure if you're watching that fight. I just don't think it was that close, and I think I'm not going to call that a robbery, but it feels as if, again, kind of like the Easter thing, it just doesn't feel like you're giving a guy enough chance of winning when you're scoring it like that.
Because what John said, I think, plays into effect there, because when I watched the fight again, I think I both had him win him three rounds clearly. And then you had 6 rounds that could have went either way. So that's a guy right there that scored every round the same way all the time. But I can't understand that to the point, as John said, if you score a round in a certain way. Because if I judged off of something different than what I did, I would have probably had Pacquiao win him by a couple points.
Well, and let's go to your point real quick about ESPN and how they're kind of swirling up the drama here. I mean, when you listen to Teddy Atlas ringside, and I don't mind Teddy. I mean, he's done a solid job for a long time. But when you look at his scorecard, like in the round when Jeff Horn hit Pacquiao with that right hand and hurt him, that was a round that I had given a Horn. But Atlas, he ignored that and said that Pacquiao done the better work throughout most of the round. So. But I do want to say that it's a good thing for Jeff Horn, of course, that he won this fight. I mean, it's there's going to be controversy surrounding it. It's a hot topic for today. But if you guys saw the ratings, it done really, really well. I think it was something like 4.4 million watched it.
Yeah, that's what boxing needed. It was a great night for boxing. But, John, my only problem with the entire night, ESPN's promotion of the fight was great. But why in the hell do you have Stephen A. Smith and Teddy Atlas there, 2 guys who just want to scream, make complete asses out of themselves all the time? Stephen A. Smith didn't even know who Ali Funica was. Funica is a damn good fighter. He is a little bit over the hill, maybe a lot over the hill. But the fact that you've got a guy that's supposed to be a so-called boxing expert on a show this big with an audience that large and he doesn't even know who Ali Funica is? I mean, come on. And how many times do we have to hear him name drop that he was out shopping with Floyd or at a birthday party with Floyd? I don't really give a shit what Stephen A. Smith does, or Floyd Mayweather for that matter, and it doesn't impress me and make me it's like he thinks he's a boxing expert just because he's on his knees for Floyd all the time.
I think that I'm with Jeremiah. I like Teddy Atlas. I think what Teddy was guilty of doing in this fight is what the HBO guys have been guilty of doing in recent years. I think in years before that they were much better. And I think in this fight, maybe there's some good coming out of it that I see other ringside writers, commentators, reporters pointing this out, that, look, Teddy, just because you're seeing the fight in a certain way doesn't mean the rest of the world is seeing the fight in a way. And
wasn't Teddy Atlas telling him? Or, Timothy Bradley.
Yeah, Timothy Bradley kept saying, I think
Timothy
this fight's a
Bradley
lot closer than you're seeing.
Exactly. And Timothy should have even been stronger on that, but he made the right point, and he ended up being correct.
Timothy should have just dropped his ass anyways, because I think in that last round it was disrespectful when he brought up to how people scored a fight, and he had the little giggle at Bradley's expense because of the first Pacquiao fight.
Something I didn't know when I was younger, but I have definitely learned as I've gotten older, and will help make a better analysis, and even though Teddy Atlas is older than me, he should keep this a little bit in mind, is human beings, all human beings, never want to admit they're wrong. If you can admit you're wrong, a lot of times you'll have a better analysis than if you try to hold on to an opinion that just isn't being backed up by the facts.
Yeah, but at ESPN, they all hold opinions like that because they want people to watch, and they think being a dumbass will get people to watch. It obviously hadn't, since they've had to fire like 100 or 200 people because people aren't watching them as much as they once were.
And their channel keeps getting dropped and people won't subscribe. Exactly. In other words, it doesn't mean you should apologize when you're not wrong or say I'm wrong when you're not wrong, but if you say it to yourself and to other people, hey, I might have been wrong on this, you'll end up making a better analysis yourself and you'll come across better. And
the fact is, Teddy Atlas has got a lot of Adrian Broner in him.
Teddy was.
I mean, come on, Teddy. I mean, was it Michael Moore? Get up and I'll fight for you. I mean, he's never. I don't ever remember him making an adjustment for a fighter during a fight. I just remember him making an ass out of himself and trying to give a Vince Lombardi speech. There's a reason why he doesn't train fighters, and that is this.
Wait
every fighter that we've interviewed.
You got to give him credit, though. Right before Foreman knocked out Moorer, he told Moorer repeatedly, he's trying to bait you into that right hand. He keeps trying to push you over to that right hand. Don't bite for it. Don't bite for it. Don't keep circling that way. Moorer didn't listen, did what he wanted to do, and went right into the right hand and got knocked out. So
all I know is this a great coach. It's so great that people listen to him. But my thing is this. We've had a few fighters on, especially like Donnie Lalonde and them, that have worked with Teddy Atlas. And they'll all tell you he's a miserable human being. He's an asshole. And what he did to Jeff Horn when he goes in, at first, I thought you lost the fight. I mean, come on. That's disrespectful as hell because that dude just gave everything for 12 rounds. It's a guy that you said would get knocked out. So right there you were wrong because he's still standing there talking to you at the end of the fight, whether he won or not. And you're going to disrespect him by acting that way? I mean, I just don't buy this. I mean, I don't get why ESPN would allow Stephen A. Smith to say this is what kills boxing. Stephen A. Smith made a comment that losing to Juan Manuel Marquez was a stain on Manny Pacquiao's record. Juan Manuel Marquez is one of the greatest fighters of the last 2 decades.
Stephen A. Smith doesn't know anything about boxing. We all know that. I actually like Stephen A., but the problem was just because he was Stephen A. Smith, Top Rank recruited him in the last gasp of their pay-per-view era, which was immediately preceding this fight, just to get on there to try to bolster some ratings and get some PPV buys. And they carried him over to being on regular ESPN, which was completely unnecessary. They should know better than that. But in other words, even though this was a great night, I think overall for boxing, despite the controversy, the ratings were good. It was a very entertaining fight. You could see that this was the remnants of a top-rank infomercial that was going to be on the pay-per-view, and Bob Arum thought that Horn-Pacquiao was going to be a pay-per-view fight until he realized that HBO told him forget it. Everybody else told him forget it. He looked at his pay-per-view numbers from the Valdez and Gilberto Ramirez card with Magdaleno on there, and which, again, as I said last week, those pay-per-view numbers have still never seen the light of day. So that was the end of Top Rank's own pay-per-view, and they went on ESPN, which now Bob Arum is going to stumble into something where he might end up looking like a genius because he's going to get a rematch of this fight that's either going to get huge live numbers on ESPN or, I hate to say, will probably get good numbers on an HBO or a pay-per-view if we have to go back to that, which I would plead with him not to go back to. Let's move forward. But I don't think he intended it at all to be this way, like people are saying conspiracy theory. But Bob Arum came out smelling like a rose on this. He got huge numbers. He got a good fight. He got controversy. I know people that I saw talking about boxing that I know haven't watched a fight for years, so I know they tuned it in. So that's what boxing needs.
Yeah, so do we think there's going to be a rematch? Because I would think that with the money Pacquiao's made, unless he's blown a lot of it, I don't know why he would even fight a rematch against this kid. Because even if he wins the fight, he's still not going to look good just because of the way the kid fights. And because of the way the kid fights, it's not going to be an easy fight, and he's almost 40 years old. I mean, does he really have a need, Jeremiah, to do this all over again?
Well, to be honest with you, me and a lot of other people have been asking that question about Pacquiao for years now. I mean, he could have hung up the gloves, hell, probably a decade ago and would have been fine. I mean, he's just an interesting figure. I mean, not only has he made movies, he's done some acting. Not only has he made albums, if I'm not mistaken, he's a musician. I mean, his singing voice isn't, he's certainly not the songbird of his generation. But he's a senator. So, I mean, if a sitting senator is anything like it is here, then he should be set for life just on that pay. But in my opinion, I think it seems as if Bob Arum does a lot of arm twisting with Manny Pacquiao, and I do think that we will see a rematch. Pacquiao's already commented on it, saying that if they do it, he'd like to see it in the Philippines or, I don't know, maybe Vegas. I didn't see everywhere that he had kind of thrown out there, but my guess is that it does happen. And, since I still think that he's the better fighter, I still think he has a chance of taking it home. And, but whether or not, where would they even go from there? I mean, Pacquiao is clearly not what he used to be, even 5 years ago. So, you don't try to set up a Terrence Crawford fight at that point. I don't know. What do you go to England and, maybe fight an Amir Khan?
Or maybe you just get that fight in the Philippines, win your title back, and retire.
Be a good way to go, right off into the sunset.
But we all know Bob Arum probably won't allow it. Bob Arum's going to goad him into something where he gets hurt probably, because Bob Arum could give less than two shits about his fighters, even one that kept him relevant, after Don King became irrelevant. What about Jeff Horn? Where does Jeff Horn go from here?
I think Jeff Horn's going to be in a rematch with Manny Pacquiao, and I think that's almost a certainty. I will predict that within the next week we will hear the WBO has examined the scorecards and has ordered a rematch, since the WBO is basically a subsidiary of Top Rank.
Well, I think in the contract there was a rematch clause built in if he lost, wasn't there?
There was, but there'll be the added thing for all the fans that all three of us can't understand, but they're out there, as we all know, who think alphabet titles actually mean something, and for some reason they need that hooked onto about.
Now, my question for you, John, real quick, because I'll forget it, because I forget everything. Does that mean that Jeff Horn is a lineal champion now?
No, because I did not think when Pacquiao announced that Bradley fight was going to be his last fight, I didn't have Bradley and Pacquiao 1-2. I know Transnational did.
Well, I think Ring did too, didn't they?
Ring did not.
They had Kell
Ring did not, but Transnational did. So I did not think that was a lineal title bout. It was very close, but I did not treat it that way. Ring didn't. For Transnational.
Well, you know what? One of these organizations might give Jeff Horn almost a lineal champion belt.
I think you'll just have the WBO say that we've looked at the scorecards and we've ordered an immediate rematch, and then that will be their cover to do it. I think it'll end up in Vegas. I think we'll get that too. Now, what I'm just hoping is that Arum, which he has not in the past, I think it was because of the Heyman pressure that he ended up where he was on Saturday night. But I hope that Arum this time around will stick with the ESPN format instead of trying to now throw this rematch on pay-per-view or maybe HBO, get some money out of HBO for it. But that could be what we see here, and then Arum will be laughing all the way to the bank because I hate to say it, but he might even get some pay-per-view buys out of a rematch here. And HBO will probably get a pretty good rating, and they would probably pay more money for it. Even 20 years ago, you had HBO doing that. 30 years ago, sometimes there would be a fight that wouldn't be on their radar screen, and then it would end up being a good fight, and then it would be something that warranted a rematch, and they would offer big money for the rematch. I remember that they tried to put together, famously, a James Toney, Dave Tiberi 2, and offered Tiberi $1 million for the rematch, and Tiberi was apparently a very principled guy. He turned down the $1 million and never fought again. And I thought he got robbed in the first fight. So, I'm wondering if we might get that kind of a scenario here, but I think the first step we'll get is the WBO, which is a joke, but we'll get the WBO offering an immediate rematch any day now.
All right, Jeremiah, Jeff Horn from here.
Yeah,
I think my question is this. How many guys that are in the top 10 or the top 5 or 6 can Jeff Horn beat any of them?
Okay, so if we're talking about 17 divisions here, then you look at the rings rankings, and they have Luis Collazo at number 10, and I think
I'm just saying the guys that are top. I mean, the big guys, the Danny Garcias, Terrence Crawfords there. Because I think he could beat Garcia. Because I don't think Garcia throws a lot of punches, and I think somebody that comes and gets in his face all day would make him very uncomfortable. And I think that he could beat Danny Garcia. I think the rest of them clean him up right now. He's too young to be messing with them. But I do think Garcia's a guy that he matches up stylistically good with.
Well, I mean, I think he could make a Garcia fight exciting. I don't think he could beat anybody in the ring's top 10 minus maybe Jesse Vargas and Luis Collazo. That's the only confident one that I have. Again, if we're talking about 17 divisions, I think the Garcia fight would be interesting. I mean, if Jeff Horn can learn from this, because certainly it was a good learning experience. I mean, I don't think he'd ever been 12 rounds before this. He fights in front of 55,000 plus people, which is nerve-wracking. I mean, we talked about this before, how we thought that the nerves might get to him. He might shut down early because it's tough to do. I mean, we see it time and time again. I think Anthony Josh was a little bit that way too when he fought Klitschko. But I think he needs to, if he's going to hang with a guy like Danny Garcia, and I think it's possible, but he needs to sharpen up some of the things that he did. I mean, I don't think he's going to get away with squaring up as much as he did. He was just, his defense is good. I mean, he's got some good head movement. He's certainly not a slickster or anything, but he just needs to tighten up the things that he already does. And then I think he could possibly hang with a guy like Danny Garcia. But right now, the only guys I see him maybe beating are Jesse Vargas and Luis Collazo. However, we've got to acknowledge that this is also a good thing for boxing in Australia, because Australia's been participating in the sport for a long, long time now. I mean, when you hear ESPN and they're like, oh, it's the biggest fight in Australian history. Well, no, it's probably not. I mean, going back to the Jack Johnson fight when he was there, that's probably.
Well, actually, I think the biggest fight was probably Jeff Fennick and Azuma Nelson the second time.
It could have been, and you could argue that too. But the good thing is that now Australia is on the boxing map. I mean, they've always kind of produced these fringe contender types. I mean, like Sam Solomon, Anthony Mundine, et cetera, et cetera. Of course, Fennick was, a little bit different. Every now and then you get a guy like Jeff Fennick, or you get a champion like Jimmy Caruthers, et cetera, et cetera. But most of the times they're not producing top-notch guys in big droves, at least not like you see some of the.
Yeah, but I'll guarantee you this: the day after that fight, gyms there saw memberships go up.
Oh yeah, I almost guarantee it, and that's a good thing. The more international participation that the sport sees, the better off we are. And I'm hoping that the Australian government sees the kind of money that can be made there, and they inject money into the amateur programs a bit like Ireland and the United Kingdom have. Because in recent years, if you've been paying attention, of course, Anthony Josh was a clear example of that. Luke Campbell won a gold medal, et cetera, et cetera. That's exactly what the government had done. They had injected money into it, so you saw a saturation of Irish and British fighters in the Olympics. So again, I'm hoping that the government can recognize this and see this, and it's good for the sport. I mean, the more we can get other countries involved. I mean, you look to Bob Arum's credit, he has tried to open the Chinese market with Zhu Shiming. Hasn't really been that successful. Shiming now holds some trinket, so that may help a bit. But the more international participation we get, the better off we are. Of course, it makes the sport a bit more unwieldy, but again, we see more people, more top-notch guys, and it's just better for the sport.
All right, so we'll wrap this up. We'll give you your final thoughts. If you have any news you want to talk about or anything like that, and we'll start off with John.
Just to add to what Jeremiah said, remember, you had Jeff Harding, Dennis, and Grayson won. That was probably one of the 10 best fights I ever saw. Australia has had...
Yeah, but the first fight was in Atlantic City, I think.
Right. I'm not talking about... I know
okay.
Jeremiah was talking about
you.
fights in Australia, and you guys are right about that. That was not a fight in Australia. But just talking about Australians being around, like, Tony Mundini and Hector Thompson, and, there have been some around. But, right, in Australia...
Well, somebody's got to say Lionel Rose. That was one of my favorites.
Right, Lionel Rose. But, again... News, we had a lot going on this week. I just find interesting coming off of this fight, what you just discussed and what Jeremiah was pointing out. Where did the welterweights now fall in as, transnational? I love what they're doing, the concept, but it's by vote, but some of their ratings have been a little head-scratching to me lately. I saw the argument for Pacquiao being number one. I thought it was a little bit shaky. I didn't have him number one. After seeing this fight, he certainly wasn't number one. So transnational, I had him at number one going into this fight in the welterweight division. I thought Errol Spence would have obliterated both of those guys within 6 rounds. I don't think Horn would have gone 3 with them. I don't think Pacquiao would have gone 6.
Really? We've seen Errol Spence in one big fight.
I have no problem making that prediction with Errol Spence over these guys.
Okay, because I don't think Jeff Horn's going to lay down for him, and I don't think Jeff Horn's a bum the way most people do. I mean, I see a guy that knows how to close distance and knows how to fight a little bit, and the other thing I do know is this. He's either real happy off this and never does anything like this again, or he improves a lot for it. But Errol Spence, I love Errol Spence. I love the talent. But you got to show me something first. I mean, Kell Brook, hell, I think Manny Pacquiao could have beat Kell Brook if they'd have been fighting, because Kell Brook would have allowed Manny Pacquiao to hunt and peck him like he did Jesse Vargas and Timothy Bradley.
It'd be close, but I think what comes out of this for me, news of the week, is I feel more confident than Errol Spence, more confident than ever that Errol Spence is by far, except for Keith Thurman's right there with him, by far the top 2 welterweights. And I would think that, to me, that's what came out of this, and then I've got to sort out where do Manny Pacquiao, Jeff Horn, and now even Timothy Bradley, who lost.
What about Terrence Crawford?
Where do these guys? So I think Terrence Crawford's right there behind Spence and Thurman, but
There's no way he's behind Spence and Thurman with the people he's beaten and the talent he has.
But
I mean, you had one win over Kell Brook, and you're going to put that over everything Crawford's done. I think Crawford takes out Errol Spence. I think someday we'll get to see that in a big fight, and hopefully we don't have to pay $75 to see it.
Well, these are the big fights that we want to see, and that's why I have to be somewhat critical of Pacquiao and Horn, because I think even though the fight was very entertaining, we have to be honest about what we were seeing, and I didn't see great fighters in that fight Saturday night, that's for sure.
Gotti Ward wasn't great fighters, but there's no fight I'd rather flip on my TV right now.
No, I mean, it was a very entertaining fight, and I loved that about it. But that part of the perspective I think we have to keep. This was not great talent at this point of Pacquiao's career and Jeff Horn on Saturday night.
Yeah, but when I watched Errol Spence and Kell Brook, I didn't think that was like Sugar Ray Leonard and Roberto Duran.
The skill level was much
higher. I just say this. I mean, to put Errol Spence in the same breath as a Terrence Crawford or a Keith Thurman with just one quality win, I just think it's a little soon. And I'm not saying he's not going to get there, because I think he's got great talent. But I just think that that's way too soon to do that. I mean, you can't coordinate somebody off of one solid victory.
No, I think he's there. In this era of boxing, when you take out somebody at the top of the division legitimately like a Kell Brook, you're there.
Kell Brook had one solid win also against Sean Porter.
This is what we're dealing with in this era.
Well, Keith Thurman's beaten Sean Porter. He's beaten Danny Garcia. He's beaten all these guys. But yet you're going to put him behind Errol Spence. I just don't understand that.
Performances were not as impressive.
So Thurman against Porter wasn't impressive as Spence against Brook, because Brook had already been ruined by Triple G, I think.
If he was, but I don't think that was what made the difference in that fight.
Okay. right. Are you Jeremiah?
Yeah. I just want to rattle a few things off here. Terrace.
No, you have to have an opinion on this.
Okay. I mean,
I don't think me and John are done with this. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, when we had talked about this previously, when John had made up his original 8 ratings, which, again, I think it's an interesting concept, and I think that's the way we should travel. Of course, I'd have Keith Thurman on top. I think 2 wins over arguably top 5. Well, I don't know. Yeah. Oh, well, I'm not sure I want to call Danny Garcia top 5 welter.
Yeah, but he is, even though we don't want to, probably.
Well, I mean, if you're counting, I don't know. If you're counting just 8 divisions, I don't know. But the thing about it is, I put the wins over Danny Garcia and Sean Porter and Diego Chavez, who I think is a pretty good fighter. I put those over what Errol Spence has done right now. I think Terrence Crawford's win over Victor Postol is a pretty good win. Again, like John says, we are living in an era where, this is why it's really hard to have anybody who fights nowadays who you consider an all-time great, because this is what we have. We got a lot of them beating top 20-ish, top 30-ish kind of guys, and every once in a while they're beating a top 10 guy, but it's not often that they're facing the very best. So Victor Postol, he looked really good, and he earned his spot as the number 2 guy in that weight class, and Crawford was clearly the better man. But Postol hasn't gotten in the ring since, and he really hasn't done much. So it's hard to assess these sort of things. But in collection, I put the resume over a single performance, and I would have Thurman above Spence. But again, I just want to run through a couple quick things that happened over the weekend. A guy that John's familiar with, Taras Shelstuk, the Ukrainian Olympian welterweight, he scored a nice little knockout over the weekend. And in this coming weekend, this guy, Josh Taylor, who looks like a really solid Scottish prospect, I'm hoping he turns into something. I'd like to see a good Scottish boxer, hopefully, something a little reminiscent of Ken Buchanan. I don't think he's there yet, of course, but I'm hoping that he turns into something like that. He's fighting another prospect in O'Hara Davies, and that looks pretty good to me. But my final note is just the collection of poor judging that we saw this weekend. It just happens far too often. I mean, it's nice to see guys like Easter and Shafikov fighting one another. It's nice to see Horn and Pacquiao, I guess, fighting one another. But when you have so many scorecards that just don't see, I mean, and like I talked about earlier, not on the show, but of course on the phone, you had Ivan Galoob versus Jamonte Clark on the undercard of Robert Easter and Denis Shafikov. They robbed Galoob. I mean, that fight was clearly not that wide. They had Clark winning 9 out of 10 rounds. You had 2 scorecards of 120-108 in favor of Easter, and then you had the 117-111 card in favor of Pacquiao. They've got to do more to vet these judges. We can't keep having stuff like that, because what will happen? So what we have is we have Top Rank with a big contract for ESPN. We have Golden Boy with a contract at ESPN. We've got Al Heyman with contracts, the whole PBC thing. And we've got guys, big players in the European market in Sauerland and Richard Schaefer, and their big tournaments coming up. So boxing is making headway into the mainstream, but it's going to keep shooting itself in the foot. It's going to keep walking around with that perpetual black eye if we don't do something about the judging.
Yeah, but like I said, and my final word is this: watch the NFL on any Sunday, and you see poor calls the entire time. You see poor calls in NBA games. You see questionable calls in everything. And you see, if you go on any social media, whether it be Twitter, Facebook, whatever, you see all kind of people saying, well, the games are fixed because there's I mean, it's the same in every sport. I mean, officials, number one.
Not in boxing.
Well, I think it is, because I think that you have a lot of questionable calls in every sport.
Well, maybe you do. I mean, and those are fast-paced action games, like football and basketball and whatnot. But there's virtually no oversight in boxing aside from those state athletic commissions.
Yeah, there's no oversight in football either. I mean, NFL referees were allowed to screw shit up forever. So are Major League Baseball umpires. And the thing is this, And I will get people to claim conspiracy theories about this, but when you look at the games that are the most questionable, usually the bigger market's the one that wins the game. You know, Super Bowl 40, Pittsburgh and Seattle. I mean, come on, that game was fishy as hell. But maybe they're just incompetent. But the thing is this, as long as you have three individuals that may score different, sitting from three different angles, it's hard to tell. I would hope that it's just incompetence and it could be fixed. But my fear is maybe it's not. Maybe there's something else going on. And it's just like John talked about the perks. Well, the perks is the same thing as paying somebody off. If you want to keep doing the fights, you got to do that. So maybe the commissions, where there are commissions, which is another problem because you get a lot of states. Hell, Ohio, the boxing commission is tied in with the wrestling commission, which isn't even a real sport. But I just think that something needs to be done where maybe you just got to cut the perks out from the promoters. I mean, we all know that's not going to happen because then they'll just do the perks where nobody knows it. So I think it's screwed either way. I mean, boxing's been shady and had problems with decisions since, 1800? Forever. Since James Figg was fighting?
Yeah, forever.
I think you're always going to have that problem either way.
Well, but this is my problem with the whole thing is that a lot of people tell me that you cannot fix it. They're saying, oh, well, that's not going to happen. Well, of course, no change is going to happen if nobody's got the will to do it. Something could be done, but it's going to take...
That's the problem with the world today. It's just like when people are voting for Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump. I'll tell them, I'm going to vote for a third party. Well, you can't do that. That'd be wasted. It's not wasted to attempt to make the change. All I'm saying is this, until you've got a legitimate commission overlooking everything, it's not going to change probably.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, until there's some oversight, until there's some accountability, because at least in some of these sports, if a ref makes a bad call, I mean, you'll see them suspended, you'll see them fired. I mean, it happens, not very often, but it happens from time to time. Until you get some sort of regulatory measures, the sport's just going to continue to shoot itself in the foot.
All right, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up for this week. Make sure you come back with us next week. I'll be on vacation, but I'll call in from the beach or something. And next week we got a lot of great fights. I mean, there are probably 7 or 8 fights we can talk about next week. So I want to remind everybody to check out all of our sponsors, Replenishing Care Technologies.com, Gridiron Mo, Power Plus Mouthguards. You can find that all on our website, The Grueling Truth, at www.thegruelingtruth.net. You can hear all of our shows on iHeartRadio, Spreaker, Stitcher, wherever you find sports podcasts, you'll find The Grueling Truth. For John Einreinhofer, Jeremiah Preisser, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been listening to The Grueling Truth, where the legends